down there in the mist here at the airport in Monterey, just south of San Francisco, is of course the mighty Dash. And I'm doing another recording because I noticed something in the Dash's documentation. Let me just pop inside so that get a little bit of ambient sound going in here. I noticed something in the Dash's documentation referring to what I guess you could loosely call an overlay approach, or a blended approach perhaps. What I did not know is that the Dash's FMS will, in the case of an ILS approach, when you are in pink needles, which is drawing as a nav source the FMS and not whatever you happen to have tuned in here, which happens to be the ILS for San Francisco's 28 right, and it will blend it with its GPS information, I guess is the best way to put it, and IRS information and barometric information. I didn't know it would seamlessly do that, but that's what the documentation seems to suggest it will do, meaning that you can, instead of flying the normal ILS approach procedure, which is to get yourself on an intercept heading, pop into heading select mode, switch your nav source over from pink to blue needles, as they say, or more accurately from your FMS as a nav source to whatever radio nav aid you have tuned up, and then go and hit nav mode to acquire the localizer, and then when the glide slope comes alive, hit the approach mode. This seems to suggest that you could stay in pink needles the whole way and fly it in essence as a synthesization of the two sources. Now, I understand that for non-specified GPS approaches, you run into a problem as you get closer and closer to the runway. The needle here, the CDI, or the deviation needle, and the diamond down here doesn't become more sensitive as you get closer, the way it does in an ILS approach, which is why they invented things like LPV approaches, which are basically GPS approaches that simulate the functionality of an ILS and how it's presented, in essence, because the closer you get to the runway, the more sensitive you have to be to small deviations. Otherwise, you could very, very quickly look like you're almost dead on, but in fact be just way off to one side or another, and that could get you into a world of trouble. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of a validation flight. We are going to fly very, very quickly up to San Francisco, drop down onto the ILS 28 right arrival, which I know pretty well, come in at Menlo. It's a very, very short flight. We're not going to get above about 12,000 feet. And then we're going to try out the approach entirely on pink needles and just see what it does for us. I think what we'll have to do is we will have to program in a VNAV descent, but I'm not sure that we do, but we'll do it that way this time. I think what will happen is when we get to the beginning of the official published approach, it will simply switch us over into some sort of vertical guidance mode automatically, or at least I think it will. If not, always as a last resort, what we can always do is, since we'd be pretty much established anyway, is we can simply flick this over to blue needles, flick this over to approach, and then we can fly it that way. But for the moment, we're going to try and do it the other way. Now, there's the question of whether it's possible, and that's what we're proving out here. I'm almost certain that regulatorily it is not legal. You can't fly an overlay approach down with one mode of navigation down to your minimums for the other mode of approach, or the correct mode of approach. But we're going to see, and we're even going to live dangerously. We are going to take our decision height down to 0. So we're going to pretend it's a Cat 3 approach, and we're just going to see how well it guides us. This is something you can only do in a sim. Don't try this at home. But do a flaps 5 takeoff here. A little bit porky. I've still got a lot of fuel from my other flight. In other respects, I've set this up almost entirely as if we were doing a Cat 3 approach. So I've got my HUD set up and ready to go, and we just have to remind ourselves that if we're going to pop over into Blue Needles mode on this side, we need to pop over into Blue Needles mode in this side, and we need to switch this side to nav2 and this source to nav1, and we should have enough time to do that. And in the meantime, I'm going to move our bleeds down to min. I'm just going to check our trim, our gust lock, our flaps, our rudder trim. If you hover over it, it will tell you what this gauge reads, so you don't have to zoom in. I know it's not realistic, but there we go. Got our altimeter is set. We're in go-around mode. V-speeds are set. We are squawking. And so let's just try this little experiment out. I'm going to fly the whole thing right now in pink needles, and we'll just see, as they say, how we get on. I'm not my usual boisterous self because it is early in the morning here, and I just got this in my dumb head to do. So, a little insomniac tonight. And V1 and rotate. And away we go. We'll pop ourselves into nav mode. Bring up the gear. Bring up our 1 notch of flaps. Back our props. We're flying a little slow, so we'll pitch down a bit. And we'll accelerate to about 185. And just using the hand controls here, this plane flies unbelievably well. I'm a broken record on the subject, but just go into IAS mode, and we're probably going to hit some icing and some turbulence, which is just fine because we want to be flying IFR. So trim up our rudder a little bit. We're climbing nicely. Turn off our auto feather. I'm going to keep our pumps on. We're just going to basically be flying this the whole way. And there we go. Autopilot is in. The plane is so stable that I did not have the autopilot on there for a second, and I did not even know it. It just kept chugging along on the right pitch and the right heading, and there wasn't a whole lot more to do. I am very, 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 very impressed. Just see what it looks like outside. I'm not picking up any icing yet. Oh, that's mighty pretty. That's really pretty. That's the field. That's Carmel. Over there, this is Pebble Beach. Here on Spyglass Hill. And up we go. Let's just increase our speed a little bit. We're in max climb and we're going for 12. You know what, let's just go for 10. No need to spend all the time coming up and coming down, and we'll get there a little bit faster. So here is the approach we've got set up. It's the 28 right, Cat 2, Cat 3. We can do it down to nothing. That is just for our missed approach, as is this. And our first constraint is Menlo. Just bring back our props. And in a second I'll set up a VNAV descent, because it's getting about that time. That's the San Francisco Peninsula coming up right there, and it is happily shrouded in fog. The other thing we can do is we can probably... No, we can't arm the approach just yet. Let's watch our speed climb, make sure we capture altitude. Bring back the power a little bit, not a lot. Alright, so we're at altitude. We need to come to 4,000 at Menlo. And that's right there. It's our one and only waypoint before the approach. And it is not taking it. I know why. I've got a discontinuity somewhere. There we go. That's why. When in doubt, check for a discontinuity. That's the discontinuity between the cruise and the approach. And since we had a gap in there, it didn't know how to descend us, so no. Ah, aha, ha, ha. Let's see what our nav source is. I'm probably using the wrong FMS. Alright, so we'll go direct to Menlo. Enter. I'm in heading hold because it doesn't know what to do at the moment. Go back into nav mode. And I can arm the approach now. Now it knows what it's doing. I was operating off the wrong FMS. And now VNAV to Menlo. 1, enter. Boom, boom, boom. Top of descent coming up in 3 minutes. There we go. Spin our altitude down to 4. And pop us into VNAV mode if we can. I don't think we can yet. There we go. In we go. And actually, I'm going to set our altitude to XMAL, which is... No, I'm going to see if it just does the whole thing. The alerter will shout at me, but I will adjust it when that happens. When your altitude is above the point along the path where it's descending you, it pops up a message on your FMS that tells you that your alerter altitude, which is what this is. In the old days, this was called altitude alert. It was a little panel, and you would, on a 727, or a 707, you would punch in an altitude, and then you would essentially put yourself in a pitch climb mode, or sometimes an IAS climb mode, and when it hit this altitude, it would beep. And on some planes it would automatically stop, and on other planes you would have to stop it, but it was basically only on the earlier planes with early primitive autopilots, it was purely advisory, and on the later planes some bright engineer said, well, okay, if it can ring a chime when you get to this altitude, then it can also flip a switch telling the servos to level the plane off. So let's get our V speeds real quick. Flaps 15. Make our V at 131. Not like that. Not like that. Go back to our altimeter where we're supposed to be. Like this, with this knob right there. Okay, I may be insomniac, but I'm not exactly at my best either. Move this over a little bit. And we'll check our weather at KSFO. And I'll bet you the winds are unfavorable, but it's a nice long runway. No. Okay, 3017, so let's set local altimeter. There we are. And in a second we'll hit our top of descent. Just chugging along right at 250, which is right. Let's get everything else ready to go, because I really don't want to be concentrating on all the other procedures in the cockpit. I just want to be concentrating on validating this approach. So we'll keep our props where they are at the moment. And we're coming up on TOD. Now again, our fallback procedure to save the approach if we have to will be to flip our nav source here and our nav source here and do it that way. But just see at the moment what we can see. Keep our speed from creeping up. Coming down at the right speed, that's the right target altitude. Let's just see. It even offers to activate an approach. If you hit that right now, you'll then have to go up here, and let me just get rid of that overspeeding. There we go. Come on. Oh, that's embarrassing. I can bring the props forward. And that will give us some drag. Oh. Very bad airmanship. Alright, we'll bring the props back down because I don't want to land with the props full. Okay, they're both on max cruise. And good, we're going into some fog. Keep our airspeed down. Trim a little bit. Just look at our FMS here, not our FMS. We'll look at our map there. There's Menlo. We have to be at 4,000. We're 8 away. 2,400. 2,350, give or take, but we're already... Alright. We'll get there about 200 above. But we're slowing down, so that will actually... We'll probably get there just fine. Just see if it'll continue our descent. After we hit Menlo, I can bring us down to Seapen, which is 3,000, or 1,800, which is Axmal, which is our final approach fix. I really just want to keep it in this mode and that mode and see if it just automatically kind of does its thing. Because it would be convenient to use that for things like the JFK-Canarsie approach, which does offer an LNAV, VNAV component, but as far as I know, the Dash's FMS does not explicitly have it. Instead, it just has the VOR approach. And if I can convert that VOR approach, which does have vertical guidance in it, just as guidance, into basically an overlay, we can fly that approach at least similarly to the way you do in real life. Of course, in real life you would try to do it legally too. There's our little cheat, so I can see my throttle position. I'm sorry, my power levers, my torque settings. But we're on a nice 3-degree down, and let's see if we continue on through. Spin this down to 3,000 for seeping. And first let's see if it turns us. Alright, we're still coming down. This is not an interesting flight to fly by hand. This is just purely for validation here. Just seeing if the systems work. Let's bring this down at a nice 3-degree glide path. What I can do is just come down below 200, put out our first notch of flaps. Throw out the gear at aximal. Okay. First notch of flaps can come in. Roll off the power again, just so we don't balloon up too much. And in a second, this should illuminate LNAV approach, maybe. Yes, look at that. So it's kind of faking it. Alright, so we'll drop the gear. That is very interesting. We'll spin our bug down to 1800 for aximal. And I'll spin it down to 0 because we're going to go 0, 0, 0 here. Okay, I'm going to come down to 172. Usually they say maintain 180 or 160 to aximal. I'm going to spin this bug to runway heading. Flying at just about a 0 pitch angle. Bring the flaps, and that will first balloon us up, then nose us down. That's scenery loading right there. Okay, 1 and 2. Up comes the flight path vector, down comes the nose. And we'll set our props to reduced noise profile and down. And looks good so far. Just slow down to our final approach speed. Okay, we've got 300 feet to go to aximal, and we've got 1 mile to do it, so we're just fine there. And our flaps are set. So you know what let's do? Let's fly the airplane. Why the hell not? Okay, that's our outer marker. And it enunciates. That's interesting. That is very interesting. So it enunciates as if it were an ILS. Very interesting. Okay, we're right on our VNAV path. Bringing a little extra speed because we've got a little bit of a tailwind. There's our artificial runway illuminating.
1,000.
Just letting the speed bleed off ever so slightly. Not much of a crosswind. Rolling in just a little bit more power. I don't want to get too nose high. Okay, it's still saying VNAV path. It's still offering us guidance. And it's still looking pretty good.
500.
Let's see if it enunciates a flare. I'm cheating a little bit now because I see that the path is just a little bit offset. We're right on speed. We're right on profile. Just walking the trim up. There's the middle marker. Perfect speed.
100.
Okay, it's not offering us a runway.
50.
There's
40,
our flare.
30. 20. 10.
And would you look at that? That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Alright, so to answer that question, it seems to work almost like magic. Probably not legal to do, but by the same token, seems to work perfectly well. So this could open up some new horizons to some interesting approaches that we can do as an overlay, as long as we've got a radio-based approach and some vertical guidance. We can kind of make it work. So with that out of the way, I will leave it to you to monkey around, to break all the rules, and of course to hop into the mighty, mighty dash, your own version, as soon as you can. If it sounds like I'm gushing about the plane, it's because I am. The more I study it, the more I play around with it, the more I discover, and it is an ongoing joy. So with that, we'll see you next time.